Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Canadian Evening News, the best news show around. I'm your host, Madeline Best. In today's news segment, we're going to be discussing political parties in Canada. We will specifically talk about political parties in the legislature, which is made up of the Senate and the House of Commons. We will first start off with a description of the structure of the legislature. We will then discuss how party gains official party recognition, what party recognition entails, and how party recognition differs from party registration. We will talk about party discipline in the legislature and the various roles MPs in the House can have. We will then discuss the way parties organize themselves in the legislature, including the seating plan of the House of Commons. We will also discuss party financing in Canada and how it's evolved over the years. Trust us, that's a juicy bit you'll want to stick around for. We will wrap up the first portion of our news segment discussing some aspects of political parties that people disagree with. Some may even argue that they're unconstitutional. After a short commercial break, we will then proceed to the second part of our news segment. In the second part, we will discuss crossing the floor, which is a term when a member of one political party quite literally crosses the floor and becomes a member of a different political party. It sounds dramatic, and trust us, it can be. We will discuss motivations for crossing the floor. We will then be joined by a special guest, Leona Alislev, who crossed the floor in 2019 and went from the Liberal Party to the Conservative Party. She will talk to us about her reasons for crossing the floor, and she will even answer some of your viewer questions. We will be answering audience questions throughout this news segment, so stay tuned for interesting coverage and a live discussion regarding Canada's political parties in the legislature. Now, I won't keep you from the show any longer. That would be unconstitutional. Let's jump in. Political parties are a group of people who share the same or similar values and all agree somewhat on the direction they want their country to go in. It's much easier to get along and get things done when you all have the same values. In Canada, political parties operate as a link between the rulers and the ruled. Every Canadian citizen has a chance to vote for their member of parliament, also known as their MP. All of the MPs elected across the country make up the House of Commons. It is important to know that there are two distinct aspects of the legislature. The House of Commons is only one aspect. The second aspect is the Senate. If you thought only Americans had senators, you'd be wrong. But don't worry, that's why we're here to inform you about Canada's political parties. The House of Commons, also commonly referred to as the lower house, consists of 338 members that are elected by you, Canadians, based on your ridings or constituencies. These are the MPs that we mentioned before. It's good to note that ridings across the country change and are updated to reflect changes in the population. There is some conflict in regards to how ridings are created, but we'll get to that later on if we have time. The Senate, on the other hand, is modeled after the British House of Lords and is also referred to as the upper house. It consists of 105 members appointed by the Governor-General on the advice of the Prime Minister. Seats are assigned on a regional basis. There are four main regions: Ontario, Quebec, the Maritime Provinces, and the Western Provinces. Each of these regions gets 24 seats. The remaining portion of the country receives 6 seats, and the 3 Northern Territories each receive 1 seat. Once a senator is granted a seat in the Senate by the Governor-General, they may hold that seat until they are 75 years old. Currently, the political party standings in the Senate are 58 for the Independent Senators Group, 31 for the Conservative Party of Canada, 9 for the Liberal Party of Canada. 7 senators are not affiliated with any political group, and there are 0 vacant seats. Now we have our very first viewer question via Twitter. Molly D. from Lynn Lake, Manitoba asks, do Prime Ministers usually suggest MPs, to the Governor-General of course, from their political party to go to the Senate? Well, great question, Molly. Senators are appointed based on merit and experiences. We will go into more depth about senators and the role of the senators later on in this news segment. Let's continue. In order for a bill to be passed in the legislature in Canada, it must be approved by the House of Commons as well as the Senate. Where the Senate and the House of Commons differ is their rank and protocol. The Senate acts as a sober second thought, and when passing laws in Canada. Senators are elected based on their accomplishments and experiences. They do not act in line with party discipline the way MPs in the House do. They are smart, experienced, educated community leaders and senior civil servants who use their lifetime of expertise to ensure Parliament acts in the best interests of all Canadians. Senators come from diverse backgrounds and work to give minorities a strong voice in the Parliament. Let's discuss the difference between party registration and party recognition. It is essential that you understand the difference between gaining political recognition as a political party and being registered as a party. Even if a political party has no parliamentary seats, that would be characteristics of a new party. They are still able to register with Elections Canada or a provincial chief electoral officer. Registering allows the party to run candidates for office during elections, issue tax receipts for donations, and spend money on advertising and campaigning during elections. There are spending and donating limits that the political parties must adhere to, though, as well as they are also responsible to disclose the source of large donations. There are also various election laws that they are obligated to obey. When a political party in Canada gains recognition as a political party in the Parliament and or the provincial legislature, it is also called gaining official party status. In order for a party to gain official party status in the House, they must have at least 12 seats. This rule was introduced in 1985. The number of seats needed to gain official status varies between the House, the Senate, and the provincial legislatives. They need 5 seats in the Senate, and the provincial seats range from 12 seats needed in the Quebec National Assembly to the Prince Edward Islands National Assembly having no official rule, but precedent showing that only 1 seat is required. Being recognized as an official party comes with many benefits, but there are 2 that are especially important. The first is funding for party research, and the second is the right to ask questions during question period. The amount of money a party receives is proportional to the number of seats they have. This is one aspect that can raise conflict, as some people argue that the larger a party is, the more money they will have, which in turn makes it easier for them to run again, and it's kind of a cycle that just helps big parties maintain power. What do you think? If you have opinions about it, or you just want to engage in our lively discussion, make sure you tweet us at #Canadian Evening News. Each day at approximately 2:25 p.m., a 45-minute question period begins. The Speaker of the House first recognizes the Leader of the Opposition. Sometimes this could also be the lead questioner for the official opposition. This person then asks a question. The lead question is often followed by other questions, also known as supplementary questions. The supplementary questions often seek clarification for the answer to the initial question or attempt to obtain further information. There is an agreed-upon rotation that the members follow to ask questions. MPs who are recognized to ask questions are members of officially recognized opposition parties, but it is not impossible for members representing the governing party, members of political parties not officially recognized, and independent members to be recognized to ask questions. The important aspect to take away from this is that in order to ensure that you will get a chance to ask questions and have your turn is to speak during question period, it is that it is important to gain recognition as a political party. This is what we talked about before. But then again, doesn't mean that your chances are 0. Hannah from Vancouver would like to know, who manages the question period? Well, Hannah, thank you for your question. Participation in the question period is mostly managed by the different caucuses and political party whips. A whip is a member of parliament that is in some way in charge of other MPs in their party and works to ensure that their political party has enough MP votes when a vote comes into the House. When a vote is called into the House, division bells ring until each party's whip believe they have a sufficient number of members of their own party present for the vote to proceed. When there is a minority government or a government that has a slim majority, the whip's job is especially important because without their satisfaction that the government will vote can result in a non-confidence of the House being met, which means that the government will be defeated. The whip enforces party discipline. They ensure members do all the things they are responsible for, such as attendance at committee meetings and the chamber. They also allocate office spaces, manage committee membership, and decide which members represent the party at functions or activities. So if you want to go to a certain party, make sure that your whip is on your good side. They are a very critical link between party leadership at backbenchers. Oh, just this in. Roy from Toronto would like to know, what is a backbencher? Well, Roy, thanks for tweeting in. A backbencher is an MP who is not the leader of the party, cabinet minister, or opposition critic. Continuing with what is a caucus. A party's parliamentary caucus is its members of the House of Commons belonging to the same party along with their counterparts in the Senate. The government retains the confidence of the House mainly through the support of its caucus. Caucuses typically meet Wednesday morning when Parliament is in session, or if the party leader thinks it's necessary. Each caucus operates differently with their own set of rules, but they all pretty much limit attendance to parliamentarians. Too bad we couldn't sit in on one of those caucus meetings. Meetings are generally held in private, which allows members to express concerns and opinions freely, without the media or public questioning their unity to the party. This is very important because let's say you just want to ask a question, you don't want to be grilled for it forever or think that you're going against your party lines. Each party also has a house leader. This person is responsible for communicating and working with other house leaders to coordinate day-to-day businesses of the house. The house leaders meet regularly to consult with one another on the sequence and transactions of parliamentary business. The role of house leaders ensures that the house remains organized. If the house leaders cannot agree on a schedule, then the government has the right to decide the order of business. They still must adhere to the rules of the house, though. We will now discuss political party financing. During the first century after Confederation, there was very little regulation in regards to campaign financing. The legislation that was adopted in 1874 required candidates to disclose how and where campaign funds were spent. The catch was that at this point in time, political parties were not recognized in law, so the law only applied to candidates. These laws that applied to candidates were not effective because they failed to recognize the important role the national political parties played. As technology increased in the early 1950s and 1960s, patterns of party financing also began to change. TV advertising started to become an essential aspect of a political campaign, and parties found themselves feeling obligated to spend more and more. Leading up to the 1974 election campaigns were incredibly expensive. Some people even argue that the 1974 election was the most expensive up to that date. The most notable change in legislation regarding election campaigns occurred in 1974 when Parliament enacted regulations that limited election spending, required parties to disclose the source of contributions, offering reimbursements of parties and candidates' election expenses. They also introduced a tax credit designed to encourage small contributions to parties by individuals. The Election Expenses Act recognized political parties' existence in law and the central role they played in financing and campaigning of elections. This was huge. The Elections Expenses Act recognized three main things. The first was to limit the amount of money that the parties and candidates can spend during elections. The second was providing some public funding by directly reimbursing a portion of their election expenses and providing their contributors with a tax credit. The third portion was to guarantee access to radio and television advertising. Parties were also required to disclose the source and amount of all contributions over $100 and to report election expenses. This reform also included procedures on how to register as an officially recognized party. This we touched on earlier in the program. This reform reflected the three-party system of Canada, stating that in order to be considered a registered party eligible for public funding, a party needed to be national. The threshold for being considered national was having at least 50 candidates run out of almost 300 ridings. People feel unsettled about this law, as it does advantage parties with many candidates and makes it more challenging for small parties to gain traction or new parties to emerge. Now we'll have a couple guests join us to let them know where they were going to let us know what they think. Hi everyone, I'm Danny. I'm from Edmonton. I do not think that it's fair that in order to qualify for election funding, political parties need to have candidates running in at least 50 ridings. This is a massive undertaking for a new political party and gives already established parties a huge leg up. Hi everyone, I'm Sandy from Vancouver. I agree with the 50 riding threshold. I think that there needs to be some number that the political parties need to meet, or else the government would just be giving everyone funding for their political parties. And that's not what I want my tax dollars to go to. I think 50 is a great number because it represents a good portion of the country, ensuring that a political party, if elected, were to be representative of Canada as a whole. Thank you, Danny and Sandra, for your opinions and for joining us on the Canadian Evening News. We will now talk about the opposition party in Canada and the important role it plays in Parliament. One of the key roles of the opposition party is to partake in a public debate regarding proposed legislation, public policy, and on the conduct of the executive in Parliament. Participating in public debates is hugely significant because it is essential that opposing views are expressed and defended publicly. Canada remains democratic because the representatives are elected, but also because the opposition members are free to express their views on what the current government's activities are and how they are conducting themselves. Opposition members also act as watchdogs in Parliament, carefully ensuring that legislation is fairly considered. This is especially important when there is a majority government and it feels as if the opinions are not being heard. The leader of the opposition party gains the second largest number of seats in the House of Commons. Let's discuss where parties sit in the House of Commons. Here is a diagram of the seating plan of the House of Commons. The Liberals are the red, and they take up the majority of the bottom section of the diagram. Sitting opposite the Liberals are the official opposition, which is the Conservative Party. These are the blue guys. The official opposition side is also joined by the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, the Green Party, the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, the People's Party, and independent members. Hi everyone, I'm Lenny from Saskatoon. I was just biking by and thought I'd get involved in this lively discussion. Something you guys haven't touched upon yet that I think is really important is how parties get elected. I personally think first past the post voting system makes it very difficult for smaller parties to be successful in Canada. I'd like to see a more fair and representative election process be implemented. I thought Justin Trudeau was going to create this as an electoral reform. Thanks for stopping by, Lenny. And great to see people making sustainable transportation choices. That is a great comment, but unfortunately you'll have to bring it up with Mr. Trudeau himself, or possibly a Liberal MP. We're now going to head into our commercial break.
Is your car ready for winter? Visit Midas for tires and all your car care needs. Right now at Midas, with the purchase and installation of 4 tires, you'll receive a free winter maintenance package. Be safe. Trust the Midas touch.
We will now head into the second portion of this news segment, and we will talk about crossing the floor. As we mentioned in the intro, crossing the floor is when an MP quite literally crosses the floor of the House of Commons, leaving one political party to join another. Crossing the floor is always controversial, both in the House as well as within the citizens of the riding that elected you. While some citizens may agree with an MP's decision to join a different political party, there will always be some that are upset. Crossing the floor reminds us the importance of understanding the candidate that you are voting for, not just the party that they are associated with. There are numerous motivations for crossing the floor, and these can range from wanting to abandoning a sinking ship to governing parties building up an electoral or parliamentary base. We will be now joined by our special guest. Everyone please join me in giving a very warm welcome to our special guest, Leona Ellis-Leb, who is going to talk to us about her experience of crossing the floor. Thank you everyone for the warm welcome. My name is Leona Ellis-Leb. On September 17, 2018, I crossed the floor of the House of Commons. I was deeply concerned for the future of our country. After 3 years of hope and hard work, I found myself asking if I was doing everything I could to serve the citizens of my riding and my country. The world has drastically changed in the last 3 years, and we find ourselves in a time of global instability. As the world changes, Canada must change with it, and we do not have the luxury of time. We must recognize that foreign policy, trade, defense, and economy all depend on each other, and they cannot be viewed separately. My attempts to raise my concerns with this government were met with silence. It was my duty to stand and be counted. Our country is at risk. The government must be challenged openly and publicly. For me to openly criticize the government as a Liberal would undermine the government and, according to my code of conduct, be dishonorable. After careful and deliberate consideration, I withdrew from the government benches to take my seat along my Conservative colleagues and join Her Majesty's Royal Opposition. Thank you for sharing that, Leona. I would like to ask you our first question. When did you actually decide to cross over? Thank you for the question. For the last 3 weeks, I have asked myself if I was doing everything I could to serve my country. In terms of making that final decision, though, I didn't make my final decision until I stood up in the House, because I am always considering how I can best serve the country. Thank you for your answer. Our second question is, when did you first approach Andrew Scheer, the Conservative leader and leader of the official opposition? Great question. We had our initial conversation a few weeks before I crossed the floor. Nothing was guaranteed, but I wanted to have a conversation about some deep concerns I had about the government, as well as concerns about events going on in the world and how Canada is responding to them. It was a difficult decision, especially to leave a party in power. We are now going to have a couple questions from the audience. Hi, my name is Lucy, and my question is, do you get any money or rewards from the Tories for joining their party? Thank you for your question. No, there are no rewards. I am doing it simply because I think this is the best decision for me to serve the constituents of my riding and the citizens of Canada. Hi everyone, I'm Christina, and I'm wondering, how did the Conservative Party welcome you to their side? Thank you for your question. They welcomed me with open arms, and we feel good about where we are going in the next election. Well, that's all the time we have for you, folks. Once again, I'd like to take a moment to thank Leona Alislev for being here, as well as thank each and every one of you and our studio audience who have written in questions and being here in person. I'm Madeline Best, and this is the Canadian Evening News. Good night, everyone.